Just two, just the ones I see.
Michael Zarella, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then we have a quorum and you're present in voice. So we'll get this meeting going. I'm going to call to order this October 26th regular meeting of the East Greenwich Town Council. And I'd like to ask our clerk, Lee Carney, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thanks. Please stand if you can.
Thanks, Lee.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lee.
You may be seated, Michael.
Move my screen up.
I'd like to introduce our participants tonight. We have from the Town Council, Councilor Michael Donegan, Councilor Rainu Engelhardt, Councilor Karen Korenthal has an excused absence tonight. Michael Zarella is here.
Hello.
Although his image is not his usual handsome self. My name is Councilor Mark Schwager. We have from our staff, Town Manager Andrew Nada. We have our solicitor, Peter Squires, and Wendy Schmidl is assisting us as part of her role in information technology. So welcome to everyone and welcome to the public. The first order of business on our agenda, item number 2, is public comment. Ask for anyone in the audience who would like to participate and ask a question or make a comment not related to any of the agenda items to do so at the present time. If you're on the Zoom platform, you can click under participants and at the bottom of that screen, raise hand. If somebody is calling in, I don't see any people calling in tonight, but if you are calling in, *9 will raise your hand. Anybody for public comment? Seeing no public comment tonight, we'll go to item 3. This is the consent calendar. These are items which can be considered as a group and voted together, or if councilors would like to pull off any of these items, they can be pulled from the consent calendar and discussed separately. Would anyone like to pull any items off of the consent calendar?
No.
I'm going to pull off 3B just to give that a moment. That is something we can discuss. So tonight's consent calendar, item 3A is the reappointment of Donna Dufault to the Affordable Housing Commission for a two-year term to expire October 22nd, 2022. Donna was initially appointed in 2018, and she was interviewed 2 weeks ago. So it would be a vote whether to reappoint her to the Affordable Housing Commission. And the second item is a resolution for the 4th declaration of a state of emergency through May 31st, 2021. So why don't we vote on 3A first for Donna Dufault, and then we'll briefly discuss 2B. So I'll look for a motion to pass item 3A on the consent calendar.
So moved.
So move.
I think I heard Mike and Mike on there. Mike Donegan, Mike Zarella seconding. All those in favor, we'll take a roll call. Councilor Donegan?
Aye.
Councilor Zarella?
Aye.
Councilor Engelhardt?
Aye.
Mark Schwager votes aye. Motion carries 4-0. On item 3B, this is continuance of our declaration of emergency, and I just felt since that sounds like a very serious statement, a state of emergency, that I would just briefly review that. What we're doing tonight is renewing a state of emergency which originally went into effect March 9th when the state of Rhode Island and the town of East Greenwich declared a state of emergency secondary to the coronavirus pandemic. Under this state of emergency, certain authority has been granted to the governor at the statewide level and to our town manager at the local level. The current state of emergency resolution expires at the end of October, and tonight we'll vote on a resolution for a 4th renewed declaration of a state of emergency through May 31st, 2021. The full resolution is in the agenda packet posted on our website, so I'll just read an abridged version of that. Whereas on March 9th, 2020, the state of Rhode Island, Governor Gina Raimondo issued Executive Order declaring a state of emergency due to the outbreak of COVID-19, and such order was subsequently extended by the governor. Now, therefore, the East Greenwich Town Council, pursuant to Rhode Island general laws and East Greenwich Town Charter, does hereby order and direct the following. The town manager, as authorized by the council, may suspend the provisions of any statute, regulation, or requirement for the conduct of town business if strict compliance with the provisions of any statute, order, rule, or regulation would in any way prevent, hinder, or delay necessary action in coping with this emergency. This resolution shall take effect immediately and remain in full force and effect until May 31st, 2021, unless renewed, modified, or terminated by a subsequent resolution. Provided, however, that if the statewide state of emergency is not extended by executive order of the governor, this resolution shall expire on the same date as the expiration of the statewide state of emergency. So, Mr. Nada, we're continuing your authority here in the big chair in the manager's office. So if there's anybody would like to comment further, this is the time to do it. If not, Donegan.
I'd just like to point out that the other communities have all done this. For those of you who may be listening who aren't familiar with this this executive order, as we all know, the experience we're having with increases, infection rates, hospitalizations, funding issues, all of those things happen on a daily basis. And he participates in the daily download from the state on how we're all operating in the state of emergency. And it has required him to act really daily in this capacity, something that a public body that's required to meet, post, and all of that simply can't do. So this is truly the only effective way for our community to respond. And Andy's done a fabulous job throughout. And so, I'm really appreciative of the way he's handled all this, his commitment both before, during, and after normal business hours to use these powers to really help our community in so many ways. And so I just wanted to share that.
I think that adds a very good perspective to the responsibilities that Andy is carrying out at this time. So we will then take a vote on this resolution. Councilor Donegan?
Aye.
Councilor Engelhardt?
Aye.
Councilor Zarella?
Aye.
Mark Schwager votes aye. The motion carries 4-0. This brings us to item 4, reports and presentations. The first report is from the town manager. This is something we do at each of our meetings where the manager reports out on projects, initiatives, the COVID-19 response, and public safety updates. Mr. Nada.
Great, thank you, Dr. Swiger. One thing I would like to add regarding the extension of the declaration is, I think the other piece to that puzzle is none of the communities, including the state, is sure if in fact the municipality were to pull back and not have that declaration in place. There's some uncertainty associated with eligibility for reimbursement on some of the programs that are out there. So I think at this particular point, although no separate decisions are being made and we hope to make as few as possible relative to the emergency, I think for me, it's more of just housekeeping and keeping it in place just to ensure that we're going to be eligible for everything possible that we're requesting on a weekly basis to secure from Fema and through the CRF funds. But in addition to that, through the normal report, I've left that first couple of pages in the report, which again, I think, and I repeat this at every meeting, I think has significant value in terms of the resources and information that's included and can help direct not only members of our professional staff and the council, but also community members in terms of getting on an accelerated rate right to the resources that they need throughout the state. A couple of things I did want to report out on, some that are through the League of Cities and Towns update, others are just separate and apart to some of the activities that our town staff is involved in, is that the governor recently and has continued to come up with various updates, but more recently in terms of Halloween. So I was on the phone today with a number of residents who are just trying to get organized, and I think that's kind of one perspective. Everyone's trying to be safe, but still have fun and still partake in activity as much as they think is reasonable and appropriate based on the circumstances. And the governor recently came out with a series of guidelines, not requirements, but did want to let everybody know that they are truly discouraging any large-scale Halloween parties, youth-oriented or adult-oriented in nature, just because I think they feel very strongly through the Department of Health that that's those types of functions where we know people really well and we let our guard down are right now the epicenter of how the virus is being spread most rapidly among some of the communities that we have in the state. In addition to that, just re-emphasize mask wearing, re-emphasize use of state police as a deterrent to make sure everyone was behaving. And the reason why I got the call today was we pushed out a Facebook post for the town, and it was just to help residents coordinate timing. I think you're seeing a lot of individual neighborhoods take on certain activities and help coordinate. And I think because it's on a Saturday this year and the governor's recommending that most of the trick-or-treating for what probably will be a reduced amount that we normally see takes place during daylight hours. So you're going to see trick-or-treating scale back for, I think, the younger kids in town a little bit earlier, probably starting somewhere around 3 to 4 o'clock and maybe ending up around dusk, which is between 5:30 and 6. And I'm confident you'll see some older middle and high schoolers out there a little bit later than that. But it was just in an effort to try to coordinate and help the residents on a Saturday get ready early afternoon, just in case you're in a neighborhood that sees a lot of kids travel their way through for trick-or-treating.
Andy,
Yes.
a quick question. For those who haven't had the chance to go to the state website and look at those guidelines, do you have any, if anybody's watching this, do you have any information on whether or not, are we supposed to be handing things out, setting them on the porch? What is, if you're not in a position to talk about that, everybody can go to the website.
Yeah.
I just didn't know.
Yeah, sure. Like it's just really guidance, and I think it's just kind of what the best safety protocol would be in your comfort level. But I think at this point, I think the recommended process would be to either leave it out or to bag it in small bags and just leave those bags out, and not have a direct understanding that it's going to be handled at some point by someone in terms of either placing it outside or having it in a bag. I think they feel better off that there's some separation between individuals, and that encounter is now lost, which is good. And the amount of time that you would be together, maybe on a normal year, just complimenting the kids at the door based on their costumes, that will be lost. But at least there'll be enough separation. So I think from what I've heard from most people, I think the whole idea of having bags pre-made up and leaving them out, or having individual candies or some other item left out, is probably the preferred option at this point. But yeah, you're not seeing any formal policy in that respect on Halloween, but I think people are just trying to do the prudent thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. A couple of other things came up recently, and I know Lee is going to comment on some of them in her report, but I was party to a conversation, one of our statewide calls with Colonel Manny, Jim Manny from the state police. And what the colonel was able to do for all the cities and towns is really highlight the level of scrutiny and extra coordination that's occurring with the upcoming election on a local level. He was able to reiterate and provide some focus for all cities and towns regarding the ballot box security. Noted a few things that, they are actually the property of the State Board of Elections, in that the state police actually has security responsibility for those. There are mandates which we're compliant in terms of having 24/7 video surveillance, as well as coordination with local law enforcement. But when it comes to the actual polling places themselves, and Lee and I was talking about this earlier today, that's actually a municipal responsibility. So we'll be coordinating with our chief and our local staff to make sure that we have ample coverage that typically rolls through the polling places. Even though it's probably going to be a larger turnout overall, we're probably expecting a less number of residents appear at polling places on election day, just due to all the options that everyone has now. We've had, and Lee will comment, we've had a robust flow of people coming through town hall on a daily basis in terms of in-person voting, and we have a significant population that's taking advantage of the mail ballot. So we would expect that all to provide for less traffic on election day, and hopefully ease for those that are going to take up that option. In terms of just a brief comment on the CRF funds, so we're continuing, nothing has changed. We're continuing to work with our state agencies and partners. We're continuing to receive our state aid of pilot, motor vehicle, and for those that receive, East Greenwich does not, but those that receive distressed community aid are receiving those on a monthly basis. And that process is continuing, and we're continuing to receive those. So we hope, we stand prepared to work with all the state agencies and hope that that process continues right through the full fiscal year. One item that was reported out on just recently was the coordination, some action the council had taken a couple of meetings back regarding maintenance of effort. So that's clearly a hot topic on a statewide basis in all cities and towns and all school districts. So we did receive a response as issued on October 20th from the Department of Education, and I think that this brings some clarity, but also brings some additional questions. And so, if I can just point to one section. So basically, it's a reiteration of Rhode Island General Laws, Section 16-7-23, which talks about a community that experiences a non-recurring expenditure for its schools may deduct that non-recurring expenditure in computing its maintenance of effort. The deduction of non-recurring expenditure shall be with the approval of the commissioner. And that's kind of what we talked about at our prior meeting, which spurred the council to issue a resolution looking for statewide support for relief. The next sentence is, I think, what will, for me anyways, and I think many others will draw some additional questions. This sentence reads, to that end, unique extraordinary expenditures submitted to the Commissioner of Education to open and sustain in-person teaching and learning for the 2020-21 school year shall be considered non-recurring and be excluded from the local maintenance of effort calculation. So that's good news about the reopening cost and about costs incurred on a one-time basis, and hopefully that would be things like some of the additional staffing costs, hopefully all of the partitions and other modifications, the increased cleaning costs and things of that nature, because that specifically has to deal with in person. What I'm curious about, and I'm very confident that this will be covered on a statewide basis, is what called for the distinction of in-person only, and I'm assuming that it was speaking to the original intent of the law when it was first passed. But at the end of the day, no one has a crystal ball, and it's clearly education and learning can take a lot of different forms. And so I'm unsure why administratively RIDE is drawing that distinction where there may have been some remote learning, one-time, non-recurring costs that municipalities have to provide. And I'm unsure why in their response, they're attempting to separate those out from that general law. So that's something I haven't even had a chance to talk to Peter and Andy about it, but I think that's something we'll be following through on to try to get some additional clarification.
Mark?
Mr. Donegan.
So Andy, without putting reading too much into it, when the governor kind of ordered everybody back to school, opened up the schools, we had some communities say no, right?
That's right.
Warwick wasn't going back. And I think the governor expressed disappointment there, and it would seem like this carve out is targeted probably that way. But what it does have is the unfortunate sort of collateral damage in that very legitimate COVID related expenses for hybrid circumstances.
Yes.
Or in communities where the children have opted out, the families have opted out, or you have special needs that can no longer be met at the schools that are being met remotely or with additional expense. All of those should be covered. And, I think that, Andy, I know that Senator Valverde and Representative Caldwell indicated that they were going to work with us and RIDE to try to talk this through.
That's
it would
correct.
seem like we want to make the next step to work with our lawyers, wrap in the school committee,
Yes.
and try to go proactively and get that meeting to talk through that. Because if we need to get some more encouragement to RIDE, we got to act pretty quickly. And if we have to go around this and go to the General Assembly, we need to know that too.
Yes. Yeah, I agree, Mike.
Does that seem to make sense to the rest of the counselors?
Yeah, I think we had discussed moving forward with the type of approach you have summarized, Michael, using our legislators at both the governor's level ride and also with the General Assembly and looking at statutory changes as well. So we're going to proceed with that. I mean, the letter is partially reassuring, but as you've mentioned, there's a lot of wiggle room there. So we'll
Right,
continue with the process that we had outlined at the last meeting.
Right, and there may be many expenses that are related to both, or could arguably be just what you call them. You know, we don't want the school committee, you know, to be flying blind as to how they categorize things, and then find out afterwards that if they called it a different thing, if it was styled differently, that it would be reimbursable. So I think this is going to be a really important thing for us to address between now and January. And so, you know, Andy, can we keep this on our agenda every meeting and see what we can do this coming week to talk to our representatives and try to, in the school committee, and try to move this forward?
Sure thing. Yeah, I think
I have
absolutely.
a
Yep.
quick question. I was curious. I mean, did the school committee weigh in on any of this? And did I'm assuming other towns are also supporting us in this, or very supportive of this resolution that we sent out, asking for a separation between maintenance of effort and then the COVID related expenses. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I think municipalities are supportive. I would not be surprised if not all school districts would be supportive based on their own individual situation, you know, where they feel their funding levels are. If they think they're still catching up, they may not want to broker away an opportunity. Some may not, and I'm not saying, I have not had a direct conversation here locally, but I think we've heard some favorable comments that have been made about just trying to understand where we are. And I think part of the other delay in this process maybe is our district and others just getting a handle on the full extent of all of the expenses. It's easier said than done. And I think at a point in time in any given week, that number just continues to change. So, but I think getting the construct in place and getting an understanding as to what is and isn't eligible couldn't come soon enough. And I'm just a little concerned. I agree with you, Mike, in terms of what the context of that statement probably is, and its carve out. But let's, you know, I think even though we today, even if we thought we did not have a significant exposure, you know, I can't tell you what it's going to be like by year end.
Right. Plus what can also happen is, because this is kind of, you know, I'm kind of lawyering this now, but who determines what it's reimbursing? So we could give the exact same money and say, this is all for, and then recite that language, right? In the school, extraordinary expenses.
Yes.
And just like any other appropriation, once we give it to them, we have no control over how they spend it. So Peter, I guess I'm looking at you on this one. If we say, here's a supplemental appropriation, all to be used for this, and they use it for remote learning, some of it, how would you even know, right? It goes into the general pot. You know, what do you think, Peter?
So, and Andy, you can jump in if I'm incorrect on this, but I'd imagine that some of the costs are spent from the town side and the materials are given directly to the school, or are all the costs, like for the dividers, and are they all coming out of the school budget?
Yes, most of them are. Yeah, there may be a couple of unique examples that we're involved in fronting some of the funding that they did not have. But I would say most are coming right from the schools program, schools budget. Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, I think you're right. It's a tough issue to track process-wise.
Right. It's like interest tracking, right?
Yeah.
Can't be done.
Yeah. I mean, we can say on the front end, this is why we're doing it. But as you point out, you know, the school committee has the authority to spend the money once it's appropriated to them on what they think is appropriate. Now, on the back end, the school committee can track where the money's being spent and provide the the invoices, so to speak, and show here's what we spent the money on. So really, I think the school committee needs to be involved and on board
Of course.
with, because if the school committee is on board with having this designated as a one-time expense and not wrapped into the maintenance of effort, then I think we could both just coordinate on both ends and make sure that we
Right, we do an
track it.
MOA or something, something that everybody
Yeah.
agrees to. But I would think that, I mean, let's take an example of, because this statement from RIDE, aside from quoting the statute, it's like a sentence, which even uses the word like unique. Why would that have, this is not a lawyer's document. It doesn't seem to be crafted with precision and thought. And so what I would think is, let's say that the school committee asked us for an appropriation for $100,000, which only related to HEPA filters and, room dividers, right? Clearly in school. And we gave them $100,000. And then they took the $100,000 and bought ice cream machines. In the end, we can't control that. So it can't be the test as to whether it's an appropriation that meets the definition of that ruling has to be when the council makes the appropriation, since we can never control what that it's spent on that, right? Because otherwise, any school committee, even if they agreed with the MOA and we gave them the money, if they spent it on something else, what does that suddenly turn our appropriation that was for in-school learning? It disqualifies it after we've given them the money? That doesn't make any sense. So what do you think, Peter? It's got to be how the allocation occurs. And I think your recommendation that we do it with the school committee, of course, and maybe have an MOA is the best way to do it. But I got to think it's an upfront test on when the appropriation's made.
Yeah, I think as a matter of logic, I agree with you. I'm looking at the statute now, and it says a community that experiences a non-recurring expenditure for its schools. So I guess that's kind of a vaguely worded way of phrasing that, experiencing an expenditure. It doesn't really say whether you're incurring it, but it sounds like that language is focused on when the obligation comes due. So an unexpected obligation, if that's what
Or
gives
the
rise to the
expense.
need, to the expense.
So they were already paying it, right? And then they would come
Yeah.
to us for an appropriation. And this just comes down to whether or not, if first we meet with RIDE and have them kind of rescind that piece of it, because that makes no sense. If they won't, because of the political implications we talked about with the other schools, then I think we have to draft an MOA with the school committee, craft it in the best way we can to track the statute in this ruling and move that way. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I think on that question of the language talks about expenditures, so I think you have to spend the money on something that's non-recurring.
Right, I
So
was
they-
thinking about the distinction of they spent the money, and it's non-recurring. The question is, if they spent some for in-school and some remote.
Okay.
What I'm saying, as long as our appropriation amount says that it has to be used for the one-time non-recurring in school, I think that's about as far as RIDE can look at it. Because the consequence to looking at it, when we give them the money, you can't track that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It goes into
Submit
the
to us,
pot and then they, yeah.
I just say, let's say submit to us the expense, the invoice. In other words, they bought the HEPA filters, they give us an invoice for $100,000.
And tell us what their expected costs are going forward for this year, or the one-time expenditures,
Yeah, but I think on the back end, because when this comes into play, it's going to be the next year when we decide whether or not to include this in the maintenance of effort. And I think at that point we'd have to see whether they spent the money or obligated it, and we could look at that point to see what they actually did with the money.
But what
Now,
I
granted-
fear, Mark, is that let's say they gave you the actual expenses and they were only in school.
Yep.
Even if you give them exactly that money and they haven't even paid the bill yet, right? They just send that money to the vendor, right? That's the best we could do. But suppose you see that and then you appropriate the money, the 100,000 for clearly in school, and then they spend it on something else. Does that turn what was otherwise not maintenance of effort into it because they spent it? Once it's out of our hands, we can't control that. That makes no sense. It means anytime a school wants, and we give them the appropriation consistent with this exemption, it doesn't count if after we let go of the money, the school committee spends it on something else. That can't be. It would make this decision, it would make the exemption provided in that policy devoid of meaning, because it makes anything unilaterally maintenance of effort by the school committee. What do you think, Peter?
I mean, I think that's a good point. I don't think the language of the statute answers everything. But I wonder if, as a practical matter, that the expenses that would fall under this clause are things that you really need to spend money on. So if they're asking for a one-time bump and they're telling you, well, we really, really need to spend this money on dividers and extra cleaning costs and all the type of things that they need to spend it on. I think if it's the type of expense that would fall under this clause, they're probably going to spend it on that money anyway, because it's
No. I think we're you and I keep circling the same thing. So I get it to the extent that they incur anything. I'm imagining a world where they say we spend 250,000 in school and 250,000 for remote learning. Can we give them the 500? Say we're allocating this to you for you to use, and then what we say is one-time expenditures for in the school, right?
Yep.
And then
Yep.
we allocate it to them. And they tell us, here's what we spent, and our expectation is we'll need it for these one-time, non-recurring, blah, blah, blah. We give them all the money. If after we give it to them, they spend, it just reimburses them, right? There's no interest tracking that will show what we put in their general pot ended up going for remote learning. And I defy RIDE to track that and win.
Yeah, I guess, and the one issue is that this would really only come up if there was a dispute, I'd imagine, between the school committee, between the school district and the town.
Only. Is
I
it
could
MOA
only-
binding on them?
I don't know. I'm not so sure on
Yeah,
this
that's a tough
topic.
one.
It's a tough one, yeah.
Yeah.
What I would say is, so we're not there yet, right? Thank goodness.
Mhm.
We've got some time to get things organized, and
Yep.
and the general discussion is not stating that there will be, right, a challenge or a question or a appropriation. We just want to make sure that we're in order, because in my world, I'm hoping that the council doesn't have to write that check and that
Right.
those funds are reimbursed, right? So that's why we're spending so much time on dealing with CRF funds and state budgets and other things. And hopefully there'll be, and we'll know fairly soon, hopefully, that there'll be ample funds there to reimburse all our districts, and so that this issue will become moot. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be organized and be ready for it when it comes, if it comes in the coming months. We won't know until later on this winter really where the school system's going to be. Don't forget that they also have reserve funds. The town took several steps to, as you're referring to, Mike, regarding the potential of another allotment of funds to be able to support them. But we'll know a lot more probably late winter relative to what all the reimbursements will be. Well, we're looking at like the balance that school might have to cover those categories of funding that are not going to be, we're just not going of a challenge, but turn around.
to provide the
Yes.
money, in which
That's-
case,
Yes.
and I'm going to ask
Peter,
Peter a question of,
One question?
Yeah.
Peter, are we
Yeah.
able to discuss this, or do we need to open up a new topic for the Open Meetings Act? I don't know if this is actually on the agenda, what we've been talking about.
Well,
I don't want to have any violations.
yeah, it's definitely, we can't take any action on it tonight, since it was just included in the town manager's report. You can discuss the items that are in the town manager's report, but obviously you can't take any action regarding them until they're a separately posted agenda item for vote.
All right, so we don't need to move to open a new topic. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mike. I just want to make sure.
No, that's fine.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thanks.
I think also Mike, I didn't mean to turn this into a lawyer's discussion. It's just that this is going to become a thing and involve the schools committee. And so I just thought it would be, good for all of us to kind of noodle it out. The other thing that I'll be asking Peter, if it turns out that we ever do appropriate money and then the federal monies come back, is can we then give money to the school committee and have them rebate money for a prior year, thus reducing the maintenance of effort number? But we don't have to answer that now.
They would never do it anyway.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No, there's a lot of interesting threads there that we're going to be pursuing. And I think, as you mentioned, Michael,
Yes.
we'll keep this on our agenda. Every 2 weeks we'll have an update on this.
Thanks.
So, Andy Nada, are you in the midst of your report, or where are you now with your report?
Yeah, just a couple of quick last pieces. One is just want to give everybody an update on the Take It Outside RI program. Initially for round two, as everybody knows, we were awarded $75,000, upwards of 80 plus applicants in round one. Round two, they had about 125, give or take, applications of some really creative things. A lot of the same communities and organizations reapplied, but a lot of new ones did as well. And I really was not holding much hope, but in the end, we secured another 25,000 in round two, which is great, which bumps up our overall number to 100,000 for the program. We expect to be receiving all our barricades for use in front of select restaurants this week. Hope to have them out by the end of the week. We are supposed to receive a shipment of our 40 patio heaters. Hope to have all those put together if we receive them. They're supposed to be in today or tomorrow by the end of the week and have those in place. Have a meeting tomorrow with chamber officials, and we're just assessing other needs that businesses have relative to other lighting and other kind of hardscape softening options that we're looking at, as well as heating options. I think we can all see this week somebody flipped the switch and now it's down to 50 degrees, and with the wind blowing, it's probably in the 40s at night, and that's getting darker earlier. So I think you can start to see that happening. But a lot of the things that we're doing are also for use during the daytime, right? They're on a nice sunny 40 or 50 degree day when someone's out for lunch or having a cup of coffee. We want to make sure that it's not just nighttime dining that this is all about. So it's really to just help all of those businesses. So we did receive confirmation on the 25. Something else that I'm working on with Bob Hodling is by the end of the week, we've come across another very interesting grant application through the Rhode Island Foundation. It's applications anywhere from 15 to 75,000. You have to be tied to a 501c3 nonprofit. So I'm going to be partnering with the East Greenwich Academy Foundation, a 501c3 that provides services and support for families throughout the community. This particular grant really focuses on a number of different things. Much of it is human service oriented, focusing on youth services, behavioral health services, housing, homelessness prevention. But in addition to that, it runs through a whole series of additional topics such as economic development and others, as long as they're COVID related. So with the work that Bob has done with a number of his professional colleagues relative to the various podcasts and others, we have the opportunity to secure some equipment if that's going to become part of our more routine practice of how we use different mediums to communicate with various populations in town. So this is a great opportunity to secure equipment, also to expand existing programming. And so Bob and I are talking about our teen center, and various equipment that could be used there to help address some of our youth services as well. So we've got a couple of days left on this grant. So, and we're just trying to take, each of these processes we go through as a commitment, but I think at a time following that discussion that we just had, that all the same needs still exist in the community, no matter whether COVID's here or not, and knowing how tightly restricted the funding is that we have today, and not knowing what the future holds. Clearly, if these opportunities present themselves, we want to take full advantage of them, which allows us to continue to move forward in spite of not investing any tax dollars in it. So we're going to continue to do that. We'll respond once we get this Rhode Island Foundation grant submitted this week. And just so, and I'll report out each meeting, but there are a lot of other activities that are happening. Our senior center just secured a Department of Healthy Aging grant for over $10,000, and there's a number of other things. I know our planning department secured a smaller grant associated with trees in the community as well, relative to mapping and assessments of conditions of trees. So there's all sorts of things like that are ongoing. We're also had a meeting with quite a group actually on the baseball field at the high school athletic complex, and we're working along with the new athletic director and in the school department on a group that has been raising funds to make some much needed infield improvements there. And superintendent and I met with this group and are going to told them to just kind of stand down for the moment until we have a clearer picture on how our budget's looking this year. But we're going to be collaborating with the group in terms of promotions associated with added fundraisers. I think they're about 9,000. They're up to about 9,000, and it's $21,000 project. So they're not too far away from making that a reality. We've got another resident who has committed to fund up to 50% of a town school contribution as well. So we've got a number of moving pieces, and just hoping to keep, in the midst of the crisis and everything else we're dealing with, hoping to not throw cold water on any great initiatives that groups and volunteers are making in town, and residents that are contributing funds to. So there's a lot of good things that we'll keep reporting out on, and just trying to have some quick wins, in the community to keep us all active and keep us optimistic about where we're headed. It's a lot more information there, Dr. Swager, but I think I can pass on covering any of it in a granular fashion, unless the council has any questions about a particular item.
Granular.
Other questions for the manager? I do have one question for you, Andy. In your packet supporting the town manager's report, you have a slide deck on COVID relief funds compliance overview. Is
Yes.
that from the state of Rhode Island? Is that put up by?
It is, yeah. And I just want to keep this out in front of us, just so we keep tabs on. The key to this report is that still today, the deadline on the CRF funds is the end of December 31st, I believe. So that's an important date, and I think subject to change. And so we're keeping a close eye on that. Clearly over the next month, we should have a better idea. And those funds, the $1.25 billion the state received, really needs to be fully obligated by the end of December, unless that policy is changed. So that's one of several important pieces to that. And so I think, Dr. Swager, there's so much misinformation out there, and there's so much that so I try to keep some of this on a more repetitive basis out in front of everybody, in case they were to tune in for the meeting or happen to look at the packet.
The one question I had on there was they talk about what is required to qualify for the CRF funds from municipalities, and it has to be necessary, unbudgeted, and incurred in a certain time frame. The question I had was they talk about double dipping. And how do you allocate between FEMA reimbursement and CRF reimbursement? Are there certain things that are clearly in one bucket or the other, or do you apply to both and then see who steps up to reimburse? How does that?
Yeah, the answer to that question used to be much clearer. I think when we were dealing with normal natural disasters, I think most cities and towns have worked with FEMA. And we've got a Rhode Islander at the head of FEMA right now, Pete Gaynor. He's a Rhode Islander. He's running FEMA. So that's a great contact for the state of Rhode Island. So in the past, I think I could answer that question. I think based on some of the nuances and the some of the requests that are being denied at this point leaves that question a little bit more open. FEMA is typically very clear as to the reimbursement. So right now, some of the reimbursements that we're submitting for are not getting approved, and those that are not approved, we're automatically submitting everything on the CRF side, which is going to take both of those pots are going to take a very long time. We have been awarded, I think it's around $5,000 of reimbursement by FEMA thus far. I expect that number to be in the six figures by the time we're done, but we're still far from it. So we're going to need to reconcile that. I think that's probably both agencies' most significant fear. Is the qualification, but FEMA, the list of eligible reimbursements is really dwindling down to just a handful, and I think everything else that we incur is going to be submitted. I did speak to the superintendent recently, and the school department is receiving some funding through RIDE, so they just received, I believe the number was $35,000 in support of substitute teacher expenses. They're receiving another $25,000 on a different program. And I think the idea right now is just be organized and continue to reapply as much as possible, as rapidly as you can, once you know what the true cost figures are. And so I think this is going to be quite challenging going forward, but I think there's going to be some requirement that we reconcile, Mark, regarding so that double dipping doesn't happen.
Thank you. Other questions for the manager? If not, we'll move on to item 4B. This is an update from town clerk and IT director on renewal campaign of e-licensing for alcoholic beverage licenses using OpenGov format. So this is an interesting project that really goes back to the summer of 2019 when the clerk's office launched an initiative to try to simplify the process for filing town licenses by small businesses, allowing people to use online submissions, filing electronically. And this project has really taken a lot of time, effort, and energy, not only by the clerk's office, but also information technology department, finance department, planning, our building official. So it really has been a team approach. The manager has been involved in this as well. And it's been a big project requiring that we set up online portal. We had to educate all of our vendors on how to open their online accounts, submit information. There was a lot of information they had to submit related to zoning and parking and tax payments. The town spent a lot of time and effort reviewing submissions to identify correct inaccuracies or out-of-date information. A lot of the restaurant capacities, parking requirements were really out of date and had to be looked at and corrected. So our ultimate goal is for business owners to be able to enter all of their information online to renew their businesses licenses, their alcohol licenses, vittling, and entertainment. Then they could actually pay for the licenses and print the licenses out, all done online. So it's a big project, and it's been implemented in phases. So I'd like to ask our manager to give his perspective on this effort, and then Lee Carney from the town clerk's office will tell us where we are in implementing the project. Mr. Nada?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dr. Swager. I just have a couple of comments, and I'd really like to turn things over to Lee, who's really been spearheading this initiative. You know, what I would say is, first off, is you're exactly right, Dr. Swager, in terms of the amount of effort and time that the clerk's office, our IT division with Wendy Schmidl and her team, as well as our building official, Ernie Marinaro, and others have spent in trying to get their hands around this process. We really felt that the past year and all of the heavy lifting that the council and others went through to really kind of reset the baseline of record keeping that we have on the licensing for many of our businesses was, I mean, when you finally finish a project like that, you want to make sure that you feel confident that it was time well spent. And I can say I think it absolutely was time well spent. And we're getting to the point now where I have to say it's unfortunate it's such a pressing election year, because this also is an extremely pressing, time-sensitive issue that Lee and her staff and others have been working on to be able to get this system to the point where it's going to work for this year. And I will say, been very impressed with the outreach that's been provided. Lee and Wendy and others have met with local business owners. They're basically working one by one. Some of our business owners are fortunate where they have multiple businesses and they're used to this system in other communities. So there's a general understanding. Yes.
I just wanted to clarify, when you said it's unfortunate, this is an election year. I just wanted to clarify what you meant by that.
Yeah, sure. I'm probably a little ahead of myself, Mike, right? I didn't clarify.
Just it's a resource question, not a.
Yeah, to free up
Political
time.
question.
It's all about time with me, right? So we have only so many bodies and so many professional staff to do so many things on a given day. And I think the election, based on the multitude of ways you can vote and the turnout this year, is clearly a drain on what would normally be available resources. So yeah, thank you for drawing my attention to that, Mike, is what I meant. That's right. Not that it's unfortunate that it's an election year, but our resource, we're still at the end of the day, and I've said this before, we're a small town, right? 13,000 people. Our organization represents that. There are not, our bench is not that deep. So even somebody like Lee that does 1,000 different things, the election right now is the most important thing that we're working on. But I would have to say a close second to that is the time sensitivity associated with this licensing and the fact that we're committed, and it is happening electronically this year, whether we like it or not, and it is going forward. And I think, businesses are ready for it, and some of them are going to need to be assisted through the process. And so let me turn this over to Lee so that she can kind of run through kind of where she is at this point, what she's seeing in her communications with our business community. Lee?
Okay, thank you, everyone. Yeah, so Wendy and I have spent a lot of time together in the past couple of weeks just trying to pull this all together. A lot of kind of like last minute loose ends, just kind of want to make sure that when it goes out, it's wrapped up tight, and it is. Last week, we were able to go over to Tio Mateo's, and we met with Ross, who was very generous and patient with his time. And we were able to, because I wanted to see it from the applicant's perspective. And we did spend some time with him, probably not more than an hour. And I got to see how an applicant would handle the renewal on their end. It was very simple. I would consider Ross to be extremely tech savvy. He's very organized. So it was very simple for him. He had his Mac up and just kind of went through the online application, pulled in a couple of documents, and he was able to pay his fees online with his credit card, and it was done. So now it's sitting on my to-do list within the portal, so I can do the completeness review and then blast it off to the other departments to review at the same time. So I was really comfortable with how that worked out. So based on that, we did go ahead and over the weekend, we did roll out the formal renewal campaign to, I think, our 45 or 46 applicants. And that went out Sunday morning at about 8 o'clock. And that was the first of a series of emails that each applicant will get. It's how the renewal campaign is set up. There's actually 4 emails that they will get. And the second one will go out early to mid-November, and then again mid to late November, and then their final email they will get right on the expiration date. So, but we won't let anybody get that far. So so on Sunday when it rolled out, we actually had 9 applicants that went in and clicked into the program and began uploading documents and making changes to their application. And then as of Monday, there was 3 more. So of that group, 6 have already submitted their actual renewals. So we're like about 14% of all of our applicants have already jumped on the train. So that was very encouraging to see that. Most recently, really today, Wendy has been working hand in hand with the vendor just to try to resolve some issues that popped up in the program with regard to processing payments, and we should be able to have those resolved by the week's end. We're trying to, instead of having folks have to pay for individual fees, we're trying to kind of group them together in a bucket or a shopping cart, which most of us are used to when we're buying anything online. Let's see, applicants, the good thing about this is they do have 3 ways to pay. They can either pay by e-check or they can pay with their credit card. There is a little fee associated with that, which is not uncommon. And they can also send us a hard copy check-in, which I can process in the office. The good news, more good news, because it is all good news, is that the Division of Taxation has that taxation portal, which allows us to track the businesses that have been cleared by the state, which we all know for renewals is kind of the most important part. And I checked the portal today, and there's actually 30 restaurants that have already cleared. So 30 out of 40, 45 is really excellent. So that was wonderful to see. Again, I can't thank Wendy enough for her support on this project. Again, timing has been complicated, but we're trying to do the best that we can. All the businesses have been super understanding and appreciative of the effort. And again, I will reiterate that we are available to anyone that needs it, whether it's an in-person, a virtual, whatever that may be. But it's coming along, and I'm feeling really good about it. So. And I don't know if Wendy wants to add anything to that.
Nope, I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay. I don't know if anybody had any questions.
Mr. Donegan.
The businesses that have already taken advantage of this and completed their applications, have you had a chance to review them to see if the data they're uploading is complete, if the kind of information you're looking for, if you need copies of them, are you getting them? If they're clicking for what was already in their file in beta last time, how is that all working? Are they complete from your perspective?
Well, considering the type of Monday that I had today, I really didn't have a chance to look at any of them. So.
Okay.
But that is, yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. For a lot of them, it's just a couple of things. You know, it's really like their new insurance policy, if they might have some new servers for tips, but I don't expect to have any site plans, you know, a lot of real deep things to look at. So I think it's going to be a pretty simple review on my end.
When they have their own parking, that makes sense, right? Because as long as seating and all that stays the same, it should be the same. But what happens when we have those, you know, kind of valet agreements and leases that they have to, like, how are they providing that to you? Has that happened yet? Or we're not sure yet, right? Because you haven't had a chance to look.
I haven't had a chance to look yet, but that will be part of it because a lot of those are an annual agreement. We've tried to get them to have them drafted so that they follow the licensing year. So right. Those are all things that I'm going to be looking at. Yes.
And what do they do? Scan those and upload those to you?
Yes.
Okay, great. Perfect. Great job. You guys are, I mean, this was a lift. Wendy, you know, Lee, Lisa, you guys, you know, Andy, this is important. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I wanted to second that as well. This is, I think, just a great example of the nuts and bolts of municipal government. It's not glamorous, but it really is effective municipal government in streamlining and providing services for the community. So everyone's to be commended, and working as an interdisciplinary team is really a great example of how much you can get done when you have resources working together. So thank you to all of you. Other comments about e-licensing? We'll be hearing more about this. I guess all of the licensing will come up in November for renewal. And I think the council is going to be very grateful. It should be much more streamlined this year as opposed to the difficult slog that we've had in prior years. So.
That is thanks enough. Yeah. Big fan of less slog.
The less slog, the better. Yes.
Right.
I do have them scheduled for public hearing on both of the meetings in November. I'm going to try to see how many we can get done on that first meeting in November, which is just a couple of weeks away, which I'm confident there will be many. So, and then we'll pick up the rest on the 23rd. And then if we have to, we'll have to deal with maybe some stragglers, but we're trying to get it all wrapped up for you in a nice, neat package.
Great. Well, thank you again. We'll move to item 4C. This is an update again from the town clerk on mail ballots, in-person voting, election day preparations, including a summary of the Board of Canvassers meeting held on October 15th. Lee did provide some information back on the October 13th town council meeting, and we're looking forward to hear what's happened in that 2-week period, Lee. So take it away.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so really just some statistics to get us started as far as the mail ballots are concerned. For the town of East Greenwich, a total of 3,535 mail ballots were actually printed based on the applications that were received. Elaine and I have visited the mail ballot box every night after work, and we have retrieved 1,361 ballots from that box. Again, not all of those are from East Greenwich, but just an idea of how well that's working. I got some information from the state, the Board of Elections today, and as of, let's see, Saturday, they had processed 122,000 mail ballots statewide, plus another 9,000 that they were hoping to get through today. So about 131,000 mail ballots have been processed by the State Board of Elections. We do get a lot of phone calls because people are using that vote.ri.gov website to try to track their ballot, which we appreciate. And I did see in an email today that the Board of Elections has asked the Secretary of State's office to add another kind of category to the mail ballots, which would be called pending certification. So this would at least let voters know that their ballot has been received and it is being processed, which is the majority of the phone calls that we get throughout the day. So I was very happy to see that. As far as in-person voting, as of last Friday here at Town Hall, we have seen 1,453 people come through this building for in-person voting. And based on about 11,769 eligible voters, that's about 10.4%. So busy place this town hall is lately. Again, all the poll workers have been so awesome and just so wonderful to work with and positive. And I have to say, I feel like it's been a seamless process, and it's been a positive experience for everybody that I've run into that's visited town hall. Just a real quick on election day prep, the 5 polling locations are going to be open. They're going to be set up very similar to the way they were at the primary. We, of course, anticipate a little bit lower turnout based on the information that I've just provided. There'll be tons of PPE and social distancing. It will be a very safe environment. In addition to the normal positions that you may be used to seeing at a polling location, we're also hiring a sanitization worker and a door control worker. And the sanitization worker is going to be the one that's going to be walking around with the rag and the spray, wiping down all the tables and the booths and the contact surfaces with a special cleaning supply. And then the door control worker is going to be there, kind of the first person that you see when you come in. Will be encouraging face masks, and if anybody forgot one and needs one, we'll have those available. Remind people to honor the 6-foot social distancing. And if the line gets to be too long, that person will manage, like, you know, when one person goes out, then another person can come in to keep that moving smoothly. Other than that, just real quickly, we did meet, the Board of Canvassers met on the 15th, which I alluded to on the meeting, our council meeting before that. It was a great meeting. It was short and sweet, not a lot of outside participation, but it needed to be done, and it was good. And we talked about campaign signs. Mr. Nada spoke at length about that. Just real briefly, we are allowing election signs to be 6 square feet, which is in a little bit different than what our zoning ordinance requires right now. It's based on some constitutional rights, and that's not coming out well. But maybe Andy, you might want to speak to that. And that is going to be allowable on the residential parcels with a 5-foot setback. And freestanding signs that you would stick into the ground, just as a reminder, they are not allowed on public property of any kind or in any sort of right of ways. So the best example for that would be Avenger Drive. There's about a half a mile down that hill to get to school, and every election season, we do see an abundance of signs on that piece of property. That is not allowed, and they will be removed by the building official. So if you partake in such an activity, you can probably go visit Mr. Marinaro to retrieve your signs if they end up being removed. Again, the 50-foot rule will be enforced at all the polling locations. So we ask people to be respectful of that. And then parking, I think, is going to be maybe an issue. We just want to make sure that people know that parking will be monitored throughout the day. We ask folks that are there for the day, whether they're campaigning or whatever they may be doing there for a long period of time, that they do not block multiple parking spaces with any sort of large vehicles, RVs, whatnot. I think it'd just be a common courtesy to be respectful of our neighbors, and especially our older folks and our seniors that might have some mobility issues, especially if the weather is not nice. So that's my brief report. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that?
No, thanks again, Lee. Your office and the poll workers have been great. I had firsthand experience of being removed from within 50 feet of the polling place because I was socializing inside that perimeter. So they are really right on it. So thanks again, and good luck 1 week from tomorrow.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Since this is educational for the public, is there anyone from the public who has any questions for our town clerk? I don't see any hands being raised. So this will take us to item 5, new business. This is a discussion and possible vote on the appointment of 2 counselors to serve with administrative staff in a task group to explore the future of the old Kent County Jail located at 110 King Street, currently owned by the East Greenwich Historic Preservation Society. I'll ask our town manager to update the council and the public on the status of the old Kent County Jail and some recent discussions that the manager has engaged in with the Historic Preservation Society. Mr. Nada.
Mark, before we start, is there something I can put on the record?
Sure.
I have strong issues regarding this jailhouse. However, my brother is now a renter of the building. I don't think that would affect what's going on here today, but I just wanted to put that out there. I don't, Peter, would I have to recuse myself?
This is just, well, if it could affect anything that could affect your brother's lease, you would have to recuse from. I don't know if this necessarily would. Let me.
I don't think it would. It's just a lease. But I do have some strong opinions on keeping the building with the town.
Okay. So is it a different portion of the building?
He rented the jailhouse spot.
The jailhouse spot?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's only one building,
Yeah.
Pete, so it's inside the one building. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a discussion and vote about keeping that with the town, and your brother has the lease. I think that probably, to be safe, would
Well,
require
the vote,
recusal.
Peter, the
Yeah.
vote is essentially just to appoint a liaison to the Preservation Society. It's not a vote on any action related to the jail. It's just to designate someone who can represent the council in any discussions going forward.
Okay, but I would recommend that you don't take that charge on, Mike.
All right, I'll recuse myself then, unfortunately.
Well,
How about if my interest is against my brother, not for my brother? But
Well, I think
you know,
we would have-
out of abundance of caution, I'll recuse myself from this.
I think
Yeah.
you can't be the liaison, Mike, but you could potentially participate in the discussion.
But my discussion would be basically that I want to do whatever we can to save the building, and I don't know if I'm just trying to put myself in a tough position here.
yeah, my suggestion is that if it could have any financial impact on your brother, either positive or negative, the best thing to do is recuse. And then if it comes back after liaisons are appointed, you could get an ethics advisory opinion, and if they allow you to sit, you'd be within the safe harbor.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Michael, are you going to officially recuse?
Yeah, I'm gonna, yes.
Okay,
Is there anything else on the agenda after this?
that is the final item.
I'm gonna recuse myself on this. Thanks.
Okay, so you'll have to fill out a recusal form and file it with the town clerk.
I'm also gonna leave the meeting only because there's nothing else after this.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
If we add an item, we'll give you a call.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Nada, now we are down to 3 counselors.
Okay.
So, time to tell us what your discussions have been.
Okay, we only need 3. So, so what I want to do is provide the council with some context to a few conversations that I've had with Historical Preservation Society regarding a couple of different things. I think it's important to lay the context as to how we got to the place that we are today, and ultimately get you the information you need to decide what level of conversation you want to have with the Historic Preservation Society regarding this building. So it was many months ago, just after I had started, that I had the number of the board members had reached out to me for a conversation, and it was I was contacted in somewhat of an urgent way by a member of the board, somewhat having to dealing with a little bit of what we're going to talk about and some of the comments that are in this memo that I provided, that were provided by board members. And it was about really the future of the organization and their ability to tend and care for this building, which now they have now they are owners of, and had acquired, decades earlier for $1, when it really had become somewhat derelict, and really no one was looking to kind of take it on as a project. And clearly no better facility in the community for our Historic Preservation Society than a facility of such historic significance to the community. Had that meeting and really didn't hear anything back for quite some time. So what I did just recently on Wednesday the 14th, I had reached back out just prior to that to the board and said, I have a few things on my mind. I just want to check in with you, see how you're doing. Has anything changed regarding the financial status and of the organization, and interest and vision of the committee in terms of their work in the building. And second to that, wanted to just I had only been thoroughly in the building one time to see a full tour of it, attic to basement, and really had lost kind of perspective on what some of the rooms were like and how many people it could handle and its overall condition. So selfishly, I wanted to get back in to take a look at that, as I've been communicating with a number of members of our staff regarding a way that we could help support the society in terms of drawing increased attention, potentially hosting some community type activities there, in the hosting of activities in the building, drawing more attention to it, maybe broadening and expanding the support base that they need to raise funds, maybe future tenants and other things, to be able to help move it forward. And then as part of that, knowing the town, the resources and skilled professional staff that we have available, maybe work with them to make some minor improvements to make sure the building was safe and accessible and the restrooms were appropriate, and work collaboratively if they were continuing in that same vein of just kind of managing the building in its present condition. So what I got from my conversation was not that. So what I did learn very quickly in this follow-up meeting on the 14th was the fact that I think the concerns of the board had progressed much farther than I had anticipated. The group had already started having conversations about the future financial viability of the organization. Really, their inability to manage this building was just a weight on their chest, and really in the way of them actually providing substantive, routine, historical programming in the community. And they are now really investing all of their time and money in just trying to keep the lights on in this building, which is really something I could really sense very early in the conversation, that they were pretty much just finished with that. And that, not unique to this organization. I've known many before them who have been in a similar case. It's it's exciting and it's romantic to take over the building of any type and create a home and have a place of operations. It's another thing to really take care of a building that is hundreds of years old and is a very large facility that has no property, no parking, is not accessible, and requires hundreds of thousands of dollars in work to bring it along. So not surprising to me. I was surprised I hadn't really heard more about it. So as we ended that conversation, I kind of found myself maybe defending more so the preservation perspective of the building, when I was sensing and had to stop the group at times from talking about the fact that they were pretty much to a point where they were interested in possibly selling the building. So we paused for a moment. We had a good conversation on the history, the work they've done. And I think when we concluded, we realized that, you know, in having a conversation like this, there was no place to start no appropriate place to start it other than with the council and the community, just to ensure what the interests of the council and community are, what expectations we have in terms of preserving this historic piece. You know, for me, and I've only been here a short time, it would kind of parallel the loss of the town hall on Main Street, right? Originally, that, you know, you can look back now and say, you see photos, my goodness, what a significant piece of architecture and role that it played in the community. Boy, I wish we would have that back. And so to have this same conversation today about another facility that is going to be a major part of the waterfront study that the council is going to be looking at in the next couple of years, as well as looking at the abutting property, looking at what we're doing in the community in terms of economic development and other types of programming. I was really thrilled that the board, at the end of our conversation on the 14th, felt that it would be the appropriate first step to communicate with the subcommittee of the council, just to vet the issues, kind of assess each other's interests, see if it was worthy of putting a serious group together to engage in a much broader conversation, I guess, based on what the board was hoping to get out of the building. Originally, they had inherited it really for $1. It was in very poor condition. They've worked feverishly over decades in terms of raising grant funds and other private funding to just keep the lights on and keep the building upright. Clearly, there's a lot more work to make it a functional building for the community, to be able to be proud of and to be able to use on a daily basis. So that's kind of how we concluded, but I was thrilled that they were interested in having the conversation. Jen Solentrop, the vice president, has reached out to me on a number of occasions. Since that meeting, she provided me with some of the narrative that I included in this memorandum in italics that just provided some of the perspective of the board, and that I think that based on the makeup of the board and the types of programming and how they're managed today, you know, to continue as they are is not in the cards for them. So really it was to just have an informal conversation tonight, nothing really at any more depth, than it was to see if the council was interested in appointing 2 members to a subcommittee that would be an equal subcommittee of members of the board, as well as my assistants and most likely assistants from our planning office, most likely Lisa Bourbonnais, who would be directly involved, to be able to give some institutional knowledge to it. And if you were willing to have that conversation, just so that we can entrust and ensure that, you know, a bad decision is not made and that building happens to be turned over into private hands before the council and the community have an opportunity to weigh in. And that's really the summary of it. I think if we do go forward in future meetings, I think we can really drill into the history and the importance of the building. But I think this is just to lay the groundwork for at least an official formal conversation to begin.
Questions for the manager? Michael?
Andy, do you know what it's zoned and what the pre-existing non-conforming use allows? Like, I don't know what the tenant is doing, but whether that's legal or not, I have no idea. I just don't know what the appetite would be. That's one question. The second one is, do you know if the town historian, like, we have a book on this? You know, we have them on other properties. And then lastly, are they interested in giving it to us for $1 if we assume all the liabilities? And Is that what they're looking for, or do they want income from this?
Yeah. So I don't have my file with me tonight on the building, Mike, but I do have the information on it. So presently, they've had a tenant in the building for quite some time. They're small little office shops. And so presently you have a realtor who has an office there. Is not even housed in the building. I think he's been paying rent for a couple of months as he determines kind of how he might want to outfit a particular room. There is limited access. There is no parking. So it has limited utility in terms of a commercial building for some other type of interested party. The one thing, couple of things we did talk about that I failed to mention is that the group has already done quite a bit of research regarding if in fact they were ever in a position to have to sell the building, that they would have placed an exterior easement, historic easement on the exterior of the property, just so that the building couldn't be changed on the exterior, and that would have to be memorialized, but that really wouldn't apply to the interior at all. I did talk, it's funny you mentioned that particular scenario, because at one of the times that I paused in our discussion, I made, I think pretty much, not verbatim, but pretty close to it, Mike, is that particular comment, and said, you know, the town, I said, if in fact they were to look at the building and see value there in terms of historic preservation and community use, can do one of two things. They can either buy it or they can rehab it. I said, very difficult to do both, right? With taxpayer dollars, without a significant amount of grant support. So in the scenario of rehabbing it, as the society acquired it for $1 with the intent of restoring it and preserving it, we too would acquire it for that same $1 in terms of investing. And this was not a formal meeting. There were only a few members there, but I could see that that was a topic that had not been really raised with their board previously and was not something they were thinking. I think mainly in some of their introductory comments that I was not privy to, from what I could glean from the conversation, is that they expected to sell the building, acquire revenue from that, and then relocate the organization to some non-historical building that just provided for meeting space, parking, access. And to me, it was, I think the committee has gotten to the point where they just want to be able to meet and offer programming and not be tied to a historic building. So I think for me, I think that's a topic that should be raised with the full board about, you know, how important is the preservation of this facility, and if it is that important. And I said this at the meeting, there should be no one who champions that concept more so than historic preservation, right? That they should be. I think I stopped and said, I find myself in a role reversal at the meeting where I was attempting to preserve the historic building from it possibly being sold. And I expected it to be the reverse, where, you know, we have a building in the way of economic development and I'm the one championing removing